All right, greetings. Well, in this module, we're going to look at the basics of cadastral mapping. The assumption of this module is that you have no background in cadastral mapping. Maybe you came into this with a background in GIS like most people do, but like most people with a GIS background, you probably weren't taught this in college. So the cadastral mapping aspect of GIS is going to be new to you. So this module is going to cover the basic things you need to know about cadastral mapping so that you can move forward with creating tax maps and such. So the software we're going to use for this module is simply the ArcGIS desktop basic functionality. We're not going to get into the parcel fabric or any special Kogo toolbars. We're just going to stick to the basics here. And the way that we're going to go about looking at cadastral mapping is through the lens of a legal description. Now, as a cadastral mapper, you're going to have to read these legal descriptions and you're going to have to know what everything means. So we're going to take this legal description here, we're going to break it apart into a bunch of little pieces and talk about it. First part of the legal description we're going to look at is this portion here. This is telling us where to begin our traverse from. And it's saying that we need to begin our traverse from the northeast corner of the west half of the southeast quarter, section 34, township 3 south, range 27 east, Mount Diablo base and meridian. So this is where the traverse is going to start from, so you need to know how to find this location here. And in order to understand what that sentence means, we need to talk a little bit about the public land survey system. And back in the early to mid 1800s, before the West was settled, one of the first things the government did was send out survey parties to survey out the West. And the idea was they were going to survey out a grid, these squares, all throughout the western portion of the country and central Midwest portion of the country as well. So the first thing the surveyors did was go out to these start points, these baselines and meridians, which are basically lines of latitude and longitude. And from these lines of latitude and longitude, the survey parties would begin surveying out their grids. And we call these lines of latitude and longitude baselines and meridians. Here in California, we have 3 such baselines and meridians. We have down south the San Bernardino baseline and meridian. Up north we have the Humboldt meridian and baseline, and for our purposes here in Mono County, we have the Mount Diablo baseline and meridian. And essentially the survey party went out to the Mount Diablo baseline and meridian, that starting point there, and they began surveying out their grid. So when you look at the legal description and you see at that where it says Mount Diablo base and meridian, they're telling you that this legal description applies to that baseline and meridian there. And that's important because, you know, if you're surveying on an international basis, you need to know which baseline and meridian your legal description applies to. Now, the first thing that the survey parties did was survey out townships. Townships are 6 mile by 6 mile squares. Here in Mono County, that baseline that started back at the Bay Area, Mount Diablo baseline and meridian, we can see that runs just below Mono Lake. And all the townships north of that baseline are labeled as north. All the townships south of the baseline are labeled as south. And of course, we are east of the Mount Diablo baseline and meridian, so all of our ranges are east. That is the E that you see in those legal descriptions there. So when we look at our legal description, it says that we are going to Township 3 south, range 27 east. That means that our legal description applies to that township we see there highlighted in yellow. After surveying out these 6 mile by 6 mile square townships, the surveyors then surveyed out the 36 square miles within the townships. And those are called sections. And there's 36 sections in a township. Each section is a 1 mile by 1 mile square. And when we look back at our legal description, we see that it's calling out for section 34. So that means this legal description applies to section 34, as you see highlighted there on the map. But wait, there's more, because every section can further be subdivided into quarter sections, half sections, quarter sections, you name it. In this case, it's telling us that we need to start at the northeast corner of the west half of the southeast quarter. So the first part we're going to look at is the southeast quarter there. So when it says we need the southeast corner of section 34, that's the southeast corner of section 34. They're highlighted in yellow on the image. Once we've identified where the southeast corner is, we could then figure out where the west half of the southeast quarter of section 34 is. So we divide the southeast quarter in half, and we get the west half, and that's what the legal description calls for, is the west half of southeast quarter of section 34. There it is on the image, highlighted in yellow. Now to revisit what we just talked about, we have our baseline and meridian, which is where the surveyors started from. They then surveyed out townships, which are 6 mile by 6 mile squares. Townships are measured by being north or south of the baseline and east and west of the meridian starting point. And then each township is further subdivided into 36 sections. Then each of those sections can be further subdivided into quarter sections, half sections, you name it. And there it is. So the legal description reads that we need to begin at a point on the northeast quarter of the west half of the southeast quarter of section 34, Township 3 South, Range 27 East, Mount Diablo, baseline, and meridian. That's all pointing to this point right here. That point is where you need to start your traverse from. Now let's talk a little bit about records research. Now part of your job is to pull the records associated with the parcel that you're mapping and identifying those records on the parcel map, on the assessor's parcel map. So to find the records associated with your parcel, once again we're going to look towards the legal description that created this parcel. We see that there are 2 records identified within this legal description. That is, one is a certificate of compliance recorded May 14th, 2003 as document number 2003-005043. That's a lot line adjustment, by the way. And also it's pointing to a record, a sewer easement filed in volume 280, page 409. So these are 2 records right away that are associated with your parcel. And likely when you pull these documents, you're going to find that there's previous records associated with that. So usually there's many records associated with a parcel. Another place to find records associated with your parcel are on the assessor's parcel map, because we reference the records on the map, at least the ones we're aware of. And if you look at this assessor's parcel map, you'll see that there are 5 records identified on this parcel map. Another place to look for records is within the legal description that's posted on the parcel viewer. In this case, we see that this legal description calls out for Sierra Valley sites number 2, blah, 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 blah. That's a record associated with that parcel you're seeing there. And another place to look for records is within the publication DBO tax parcels with owner GIS file. That will also identify records. And I'll note that, there's records spread out all over the place, and that's because we don't have a centralized system for indexing records to parcels. Instead, there's pieces here, pieces there. So when you do your records research, you got to look various areas for various records and pull as many of them as you can. And last but not least, you could always call the assessor's office, and hopefully somebody there could find records that aren't locatable otherwise, because in the assessor's office, they have a program called Megabyte, which is only available to them, and they have their own data in there. So they may have records identified to parcels that you can't find anywhere else. Once you've identified the records that you need to pull for a specific map, the next part is finding them, actually finding the record itself. So one place to look for records is within our Mono County Records Archive. We have in this archive, it's about 99% of the records out there are in here. If you can't find it in the records archive, you could always contact the clerk recorder's office. They're actually the people it's their job to find records, but you need to learn how to do that stuff yourself, because a lot of times you're going to be able to find stuff that they can't. But if all else fails, you can call the clerk recorder's office and ask them to dig up an old record. And last but not least, anyone's allowed in the vault where the records are stored. So you could just go into the vault where the records are stored and look for them yourself. Okay, so now let's get into some of those elements that are in the legal description we were looking at. We're going to talk about some of the other elements. Now, the legal description we were looking at here, it's a 20-foot wide legal description. This is actually for a sewer easement owned by the town of Mammoth Lakes. And we also see here that it tells us this legal description that the sewer easement lies on 10 feet of either side of the center line that's then described in the legal description. So in this case, they're giving us like a center line. And this legal description will give us the ability to draft that center line, and then it's also telling us that the easement is 10 feet on either side of that center line. So once we draft the center line, we'll have to then draft 10 feet on either side. Now that's important because this is the center line method for drawing up a legal description. There's other methods, like you could also just draw out the boundaries of the legal description and not worry about the center line. But in this case, they're telling us that they're giving us a center line, and that's how this one works. There's also a line in this legal description that says that the sidelines of said 20-foot wide easement shall be prolonged or shortened to meet at angle points, commence in the easterly line of parcel 2 and terminate in the westerly line of parcel 2. That's an important statement, and once you begin drafting out the legal description, you'll see why this wording is important. Now, it's also telling us here that this legal description is meant to be coincident with another easement. That means it's supposed to be right next to it. It's having constant and contiguous contact. So in this case, really what happened is they had an original sewer easement, but it wasn't wide enough. So they needed to widen it by another 20 feet. So they created this additional easement, which is coincident with the first easement. So let's now talk about coordinate geometry. Coordinate geometry refers to the bearings and distances you will see on the map, which you will then have to input into your coordinate geometry program, in this case ArcMap. And so our legal description is telling us that once we find that initial starting point, we need to go northeast 0 degrees, 30 minutes, 38 seconds. And we need to do that for 170.35 feet. We need to type that into our COGO program and create a line. And before we type it into our COGO program, we need to talk a little bit about quadrant bearings. Now, quadrant bearings is it's another way to talk about northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. All of our legal descriptions call out for a direction, be it northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. On the legal description, you'll see that it either writes out northeast or it has an N and an E. But for the purposes of our coordinate geometry programs like ArcMap, instead of writing NE, we're going to use the quadrant bearing equivalent, which is a number. So number 1 represents the northeast quadrant, number 2 represents the southeast quadrant, number 3 represents the southwest quadrant, and number 4 represents the northwest quadrant. Another thing to note about quadrants is that there's only 90 degrees in a quadrant. So you can go from a minimum of 0 degrees to a maximum of 90 degrees for each quadrant. And 0 degrees, as you see there, that's either straight north or straight down or straight south. And 90 degrees is either due east or due west. So altogether, the bearing that's called for on the legal description, that is northeast, 0 degrees, 30 minutes, 38 seconds. With that, the direction that appears in is within the northeast quadrant there where that red line is. So that's northeast, 0 degrees, 30 minutes, 38 seconds. And the way you would type that into your GIS is you wouldn't use the degree sign or the minute or the second sign, nor would you use NE. Instead, you would just type in 0 for 0 degrees, dash 30 for 30 minutes, dash 38 for 38 seconds, and then dash 1 saying that it's in the northeast quadrant. And that's how you would type that in to your COGO GIS software. Now what we are going to do is digitize the legal description here in ArcMap. And you could follow along with me, and we'll just take it step by step. Now the very first thing you're going to want to do is download the shape files I've associated with this. The shapefile will have the starting point that we've identified on previous slides. And you also need to create a line file. You should know at least how to create a line file. And once you've created that line shape file, start an editing session. And we're going to use the basic functionality in ArcMap Desktop to code bearings and distances from the legal description using your line file. So go ahead and right click on the screen once you've started an editing session, and this tab should pop up. And on that tab you're going to see the direction length option. I want you to select the direction length option. After selecting the direction length option, this tab should open, and in this tab I want you to input the direction and the length. The direction being 0 degrees, 30 minutes, 38 seconds, dash 1, the 1 being northeast, and the distance being 170.35 feet. After you've done that, press enter. You will now have a line. Your line should look like this. Now I need to note that this is not actually part of your legal description, not part of your sewer easement. This is just a tie point. It's getting you to the beginning of your sewer easement. It's from this point that you will then begin to digitize the center line of the easement itself. Now once again, right click, choose direction length, and this time you're going to type in the direction length to the next call. That is northwest 49 degrees, 49 minutes, 41 seconds, a distance of 117.23 feet. And once you type that in there, press enter, and you should get another line that looks like the image on the right. Once again, choose direction length. Now type in this third call, south 78 degrees 48 minutes 34 seconds west, 25.22 feet. And your line should look like the image on the right. And there we go. These two lines here represent the center line of the easement that we are digitizing. But remember, we now have to, the easement itself is 20 feet wide, 10 feet on either side of the center line here. So now we have to digitize in the easement itself. And to do that, we're going to use some additional functionality on our COGO menu that we've accessed by right-clicking. So what I want you to do now, now that we're going to digitize the easement itself, I want you to create an additional shapefile. This time make it a polygon. And once you've created your polygon shapefile, start an editing session, begin editing your polygon shapefile, and click on the very beginning of your easement. You can see that little red square there in the image. Select that, and then right-click on the map, and you'll get, once again, you'll get this menu. But this time, instead of choosing direction length, we're going to take advantage of some of the other functions in this menu. In this case, we're going to choose perpendicular, and we're going to choose a length of 10 feet. So go ahead and do that. Choose perpendicular to that line and make it a length of 10 feet. And after you've pressed enter, you see that you now have a line 10 feet perpendicular to your center line of your easement. Now we're going to right click again, but this time we're going to choose parallel, and I want you to make a line parallel to your easement like you see there. And there we go. After you've done that, you will have a line, or you will have a portion of your easement that's measured 10 feet off the center line. So if you continue to use the parallel and perpendicular functions, you should end up with something like this. This is your easement as measured 10 feet off the center line. However, you could see that there's at the top section there, it's not quite complete, and there's also some sections on the side that aren't complete, which you'll notice here in a minute. Now, I mentioned earlier that there's a phrase in the legal description that reads, "The sidelines of said 20-foot wide easement shall be prolonged or shortened to meet at angle points, commence in the easterly line of said parcel 2 and terminate in the westerly line of said parcel 2." I said that's an important phrase, and what this part of the legal description does is it gives us the ability to finish out our easement such that it abuts a parcel line that's right next to it. So it gives us the ability to fill in the gaps on the top portion as well as on the southeast portion of the easement. It gives us the ability to abut the parcel line, which is there. You can't see it on this image, but there is actually a parcel line there, and the easement was meant to abut right to the parcel line like you see. So that's what this phrase allows us to do. And finally, when you're all done, open up your attribute table, and if you don't already, add a field, because you want to reference the document associated with this easement here. So go ahead, add in the document number, and we're done. Now, the next module, we're going to look into some other things, bearing adjustments, and finally, when you're all done, open up your attribute table, and if you don't already, add a field, because you want to reference the document associated with this easement here. So go ahead, add in the document number, and we're done. Now, the next module, we're going to look into some other things, bearing adjustments, and so that's the end of that. If you want to download the PLSS data so that you could work along with this this presentation, you could download it here off Google Drive. All All right, thank you.